We're Occupy Tampa. Oh, we don't have our, okay, we don't have our little lines. Okay, we're here to talk about consensus and the consensus process and why we use it and why it's good and about direct democracy and all that kind of stuff. So mostly, the Occupy movement has two different trajectories. We deal with political issues and we deal with process and creating community. And this is the creating community part. Jeff just turned off.
Learning how to be a community after growing up isolated in an isolated. I wrote a little blip here before the show started. I assumed that I was going to be the one to start out, but Susie did. And I put here, the first order of business will be establishing an unspoken hierarchy where one of us guides the direction of the show and others obey that format without ever formally deciding anything. But you did that already, so.
No, I think you should do it.
Well, I got history.
Okay, so the history of consensus.
That was sarcasm, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This is how it's done.
Oh, and mention the 813-977-6800 number to call in.
Yes, 813-977, what is it, 6800, to call and ask questions or
Yeah, 6800.
Throw the
discuss stuff
conversation
with
off
us,
track.
yes. Mm-hmm.
We'll call you if you don't call us. So,
Yes, we're calling in now.
sorry for interrupting.
So one of the first groups to use consensus was the Quakers in the mid-1600s to balance individual rights and insights, the Spirit of God, and inner light, they called it. Basically, consensus is a process where everyone gets to speak. So for communities like the Quakers, they wanted a non-hierarchical structure where everyone's voice was valued and taken into consideration.
And through having so many people's voices involved in the process, you create an amalgamated mind through which you can create bigger insights, godlike insights, you could say. I wouldn't put it that way, but some would. Godlike. Greater than the individual.
People talk about the mob or the masses being stupid, and in many cases that seems accurate. But, I think consensus maybe is an attempt to, like you said, if everyone is factored in, you have a group hive mind, like you said.
Yeah, as long as it's not a physical representation of a mob going crazy and rioting. If it's a intellectual manifestation of a mob, then it can be a very intelligent thing. When more people are involved in the process, you create a better result. That's just human thinking right there.
And we have seen that in action, and we've seen some of our, in my opinion, some of our best decisions made when we go through the agony of really listening to everyone and incorporating everyone's ideas, and we always come out with something better than we started with. And that's the idea of it.
Every proposal I've passed has had people put their caveats in, and I'm glad they did. There was the idea to put the police misconduct reports up front, and the way that evolved, there was I forget, but history.
Okay, so the Quakers, and then the human potential movement, which I really don't know anything about.
I do a little bit.
Do you?
Well, Century of the Self talks about it. Go on, though.
Okay. And then the New Left's participatory democracy used by the Students for a Democratic Society, which then when that all fell apart, the feminist movement started using it along with consciousness-raising circles, and because their voices had women's voices had largely been left out of the SDS and the New Left movement, and so the feminists developed a lot of the process of really listening to each other and hearing what everyone had to say in the late 60s.
It's a book, In a Different Voice. Have you heard of it? I think you probably heard of it, Susie, by Carol Gilligan. And I think that's the one that talks about the common feminine ways of listening versus the masculine ways of listening, of actually trying with your imagination to produce in your head the same thing that someone else has in their head, empathy, you know. And it would make sense that the marginalized groups developed
Indeed.
the, you know.
Because the marginalized groups always have to listen. If you're going to participate in the wider culture, you have to listen to what's going on in the middle of the culture. If you're in the middle of the culture, you don't have to listen to the outskirts so much. You really only have to listen to yourself.
Right.
And so after the feminists, then the nonviolent direct action movement, beginning in the, oops, my glasses fell apart, in the 1970s. And then the, oh, that's the end of my history.
Occupy.
And then the Occupy movement. Yeah, but the global, the anti-globalization movement used it widely and very successfully.
And I mean, before even our consensus process as it is, there are direct democratic groups that have existed and thrived using those using democratic methods like consensus. The anarchists in Catalonia used a direct democracy, and I mean elected leaders along with that, and in the beginnings of the Roman Empire, before when it was still democratic, I suppose it was more of a republic. But even at that, there was a section of it that dealt with redresses of grievances from the people, from the plebeians. And I mean, in other places in the world, but this process itself is unique. There goes my thing.
Fragments of an Anarchist Anthropology was a book I just been pulling up now because you were going through the history of attempts at egalitarian cultures throughout history, and that's a book that really gives a lot of good examples of those. I don't know if it talks about consensus at all or meetings or anything like that, but twinkle fingers.
Starhawk mentions Diablo Canyon in the early 1980s as a time when consensus was really hashed out with a large group of people that then all went on to a variety of movements and years later started organizing or would run into each other and all mentioned that that was the best experience of their lives.
Diablo Canyon?
Yeah.
What's that? I'm sorry.
They were young and enamored of consensus and ideals of equality. They would just pick someone out of the crowd to it was a collective called, oh no, that's 25 years forward, against the G8 meetings in Scotland was when a lot of them came together again and started really developing how you train people to do facilitation and that, in fact, you do better when you have when you are trained for it and you don't just pick somebody out of the crowd.
Right, right.
Because we've seen what can happen.
Requires a great deal of trust, being a facilitator.
It's, yeah, trust, and it looks much easier than it is. Right. I find it looks like when you're sitting out there in the crowd, you can say, well, I would have done, but you get in there and all those voices are coming at you, and it's
I keep impartial, mediating as not as a judge, but as someone almost as a fulcrum between the two sides of an argument going on.
Or there's several sides, yes.
Yeah, several sides mostly.
Yeah.
There's never two sides to it. There are always so many angles to look at a problem, and all those angles are being enshrined in all these different people, while this great mind is being created in the process itself.
I feel like I'm really good at seeing everyone's point of view, and I love critiquing like facilitation, but I have yet to volunteer to facilitate. It requires complete attention, Like my intro to counseling class talked about the way you attend to a counseling patient client, and it sounds like Zen Buddhism talk. You know what I mean? It's like a kind of focus that just I don't even know what they're talking about. But I imagine facilitation is like that a lot. To be able to see the images in everyone's head and be Jesus.
And be Jesus.
And be Jesus, yeah.
That's the goal.
It's a Christian way.
Yeah. I'd like to address the different ways of making decisions, the hierarchical decision-making pattern, which is what we see in our jobs usually and so forth, where someone just makes the decisions for us, tells us what to do, and generally they're wrong.
Because I said so, the final word, right?
Right. I've never done what you're about to do. I've never done your job, but I'm going to tell you how to do it because I want to put that on my vita. And usually there's a low commitment to the decision because you don't believe in it, so there's poor follow-through. It's not representative of your ideas, and it's also a very competitive way to do things. And then there's majority rule, which is what we're all used to thinking of as democracy. When we have representative democracy, or where we get to pick one side or another, and we don't really get to work on the process, other than with Robert's rules, you can make a friendly amendment, but basically you get a yay or nay on issues. And again,
the majority isn't always right. I mean, there can be so many people wrong about something, and
right.
you know, it doesn't mean that they're correct just because there's a lot of them.
A famous example of that I read was Brown versus Board of Education. At the time, never would have passed Congress, you know, but it was the Supreme Court, the elders in robes who, you know, I guess one of the functions of the judicial branch was to be a check on the tyranny of the majority, you know. And sometimes they function.
And who wrote that book, The Tyranny of the Majority?
No, it's just a phrase I've heard. I don't know.
Lonnie Grenier.
Oh, that's a thing? Okay.
And also with majority rule, it's very polarizing and competitive because you either win or you lose. And in consensus, the idea is that everybody wins because ultimately everyone's input goes into the decision, and you start with a proposal and you end up hopefully with an entirely different proposal that's much wiser than whatever the originator came up with.
You find good decisions between the fear of the minority and the fervor of the majority.
You know, in contemporary politics, I didn't register what you just said. I wasn't listening. I was preparing for what I was about to say. But in contemporary politics, you find like what Susie was just talking about to the extreme with the competitive. And I was thinking about the phrase waffle or flip-flop. You know, there's people have criticized politicians for being a flip-flop, which is essentially saying I learned something, you know, or I changed my mind, which is like totally. Nate's on line 4.
Nate's out. We have a caller.
Just push line 4, right? Okay, I'll just do
Yes.
that. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, guys. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good.
What you wearing? Sorry.
Do you have a
So we
question?
Talk about consensus, no?
Consensus, yes.
That's what's up.
It is indeed.
Are you at the march?
I'm not at the march. My car did not start.
Oh.
And we could not find a jump to go get a battery.
Are you stranded right now?
Am I what?
Stranded?
Excuse me?
Are you stranded? Need a ride?
Yeah, I'm totally stranded.
You know, you're on TV, so maybe someone could give you a ride. Sorry,
Yeah,
this
can
is.
somebody pick Nate up?
What's your question?
Tell him to give me a call.
Let's keep him on the conversation here. Why don't you just put him on the phone for the whole thing?
Yeah.
Well, Nate, I have a question for you.
Sure, what's up?
You facilitated a lot of decisions. What's one of the, can you think of one of the more interesting decisions that you've been a part of? Something that changed a lot throughout the process, or something that was important ultimately that made a difference?
Oh, geez, I have a series of them. The series of things having to deal with people who were not dealing with the safe space, right? Who were not working with the safe space. That was one of the most interesting GAs that I had to facilitate, where we hadn't historically really felt comfortable. I felt with a lot of the decisions that were made in the past, and then it came to this particular decision. I don't really want to go into details about people and whatnot, but essentially, it was by the end of it, it was consensus was reached to the point of the individual being like, fine, I'm just going to leave. I don't even want to be here because you guys don't want me here. And that's what consensus is. Everybody agrees with it. It's not a majority to any degree.
Terrible example. Fine, I'm
For
leaving.
example, you don't like? I mean,
No, it's a good example because it's not
that's something
perfect.
really hard to deal with, honestly.
No, yeah.
Indeed.
Like it's been very hard for us to deal with. So, historically with people, it's very thing too, in order for everybody to feel comfortable with a decision like that. But I apologize if that's not what you're looking for.
No. Actually, the fact that it was not perfect looking or sounding is exactly what makes it. I mean, you know what I mean? Complicated, the messy stuff is what it's all about.
Its imperfection makes it perfect.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like that's one thing actually I wanted to ask on today's show was like going over past controversial General Assemblies and looking at, you know, how it went and you know, in terms of consensus ideals and what we can learn from them or whatever, or good examples, bad examples, anything.
I guess from that particular example that Nate just gave us is the thing we could learn from that is that it is hard for many people to consent to something quickly. Sometimes we have to, you know, if it drags out that long, it has to be tabled and brought up some other time when people are fresh and ready to face it again. Unless you come to conclusions like that, where the person who brought it up in the first place just gets so frustrated with the process.
Deciding to ostracize someone is not easy. I mean, that's a little bit dramatic sounding. But one of the General Assemblies, one of the first times we had a problem at camp with someone who was very disruptive, harmful force. I got out the whiteboard because the conversation was going around and it was everyone just regurgitating the same like talking points that remind me very much of regular politics, and there was no organization to it or attempt to build some kind of intersubjective project. And so I got out the whiteboard and first I put a big line down the middle. I'm like, okay, kick him out, don't kick him out. And then what's his name? Smart guy. He was Jake. He said, no, Tristan, that's a bad idea. I'm like, oh, because of the dichotomy, the binary. He's like, yeah. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely it. And then so I changed it to issues, ideas. You know, like rather than kick the person out, don't kick the person out. You have, concerns, solutions. You know.
Well, I think that's a major benefit of consensus is that voting is totally black and white all the time. It's just one or the other. And binaries are extremely dangerous to decision making because they're totally stranded in those two trains of thought, one or the other. Where consensus has when it's actually consensus is very gray area oriented and just has to do with can look at every possible angle that it can based on who's there and based on just different personalities and based on everybody working together, and you come up with I say it's much more efficient, not because it takes less time, but because you get an infinitely better answer than you would with any other form of governance like that, decision making.
Yeah, that binary in voting really destroys the rationalism that makes a democracy work. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. That's absolutely true because you're just constrained. It's so constraining. It's like, okay, do we vote for this, for budget cuts, or do we vote for increasing spending, right? Or like one or the other. How do we get out of this debt? And then you're told you're not looking at any other form of economics. You're just looking at two ideas, and that's the danger of a duality in a political system like that.
Yeah, there are so many solutions to one issue. We're focused on this issue-based thinking, this issue-based look at politics and economics, where we're just looking at the problems, and not working together to find solutions.
What about like the assembly? I wasn't here yet, but where you guys decided to move to Voice of Freedom Park. I heard that was a tough one. Susie, I think you're
it was. It was very interesting. I think Becky facilitated that. I believe so. No, it's Becky's proposal. who facilitated? I don't remember. But that was done pretty well. A lot of what I noticed, I was at that, and I noticed that a lot of things that people had thought were problems with moving were addressed very easily in that situation. And it took a little bit of time, but it ended up being pretty easy for us to make the decision. Honestly, it was a pretty.
Really?
The group was pretty cohesive on moving, based on the consensus that was reached. There was still a lot of dissent, but the dissent wasn't strong enough to keep it from going, and the group was.
What about the soft move? Sorry, go ahead.
Excuse me?
Go ahead, Susan.
The soft, some of the concerns that were raised were, would we have people that would hold down both camps? Because we really wanted to keep both places going for a while. And once we got commitment from people to actually stay at both places, that was like the clincher. That seemed to make people say, okay, we can actually do this. We can experiment with the new location without losing the old location, and that seemed to make a big difference. You know, one of the first most contentious decision we made was whether or not to occupy at all, whether or not to spend the night downtown. And there was a large group of people, most of whom are still involved, who were adamant about staying the night, and a lot of people who really wanted to get permission from the city to do so. And the concerns were, there were so many concerns, how we were going to do it, how we were going to go, not get arrested and so forth. And the thing that broke that was a homeless person said, I will give you street smarts lessons. I will teach you how to survive in the street so that if you do get run out of a park, you'll know what to do. There will always be another place to go to. You never have to leave the city. So we knew that we could stay downtown without a problem, and that's what resolved that issue. But it took someone coming from outside. So it really we really had to broaden the base of who was doing the speaking, which was really exciting.
In the big brain we create, coming back to this metaphor, there are many different minds with many different solutions to a vast variety of problems.
Yeah, gotta listen to the homeless people and the women and everyone else that doesn't get listened to.
Yeah.
I remember reading about, I was, living in Toledo, contemplating moving to Tampa, and I was reading Occupy Tampa's page, and they were saying, okay, those who stay overnight are going to have to prepare to be mobile at night.
Yes.
And I was so terrified hearing about the police down here and what you guys were going through. And that's what you were just talking about, was I guess what the homeless guy taught you.
And then they told us we could actually stay on the sidewalk, or they told people they could stay on the sidewalk, and that was it. Then we had a place to be.
That's probably a debate that has come up at every single Occupy, was the degree to which to cooperate with the authorities, whether or not to hold an encampment. And it's still a debate,
Yes.
even here.
Yes.
And it's going to be consistent with this sort of, what's the phrase, a duality of power, that there is sort of a shift in power from people to the authorities that are trying to brush away this dissent coming from the people themselves. That I just choked on my own brain.
Oh, hand signals. Also, Susie, you were doing an outline. You were talking about hierarchical and then majority, and then I feel like you had another bullet point.
And the other one was consensus, which is where the minority is actually listened to and has input into discussions. I mean, have you ever taken a survey and it gives you like 4 answers and none of them are what you would do or what you think at all? And so consensus actually gives you that broad range of answers, and everybody gets listened to. The decisions are well thought out. You end up with solidarity because everybody can see it becoming more and more beautiful, and everybody ends up a winner, and you end up with more commitment to the decision that you made because it belongs to everyone. And so even though it can be frustrating and time-consuming, if you really stick with it, you come up with something so much better. So that's really the third way to do things. So hierarchy, majority, or consensus.
After a controversial GA we had in Toledo, very controversial, it was on directly about whether or not to hold direct actions to resist the police eviction. And at the end of the many GAs actually, and we decided to go ahead and resist, people cheered. Like we figured, you know, I remember everyone like cheering when we had 60 people, you know, volunteered to be arrested.
Nice.
And, or maybe it was 60 who volunteered not to be. It was good regardless.
So you want to talk about how consensus is reached, the process,
Sure.
and the signals and all that
That's
stuff?
an interesting topic.
Do you like that?
Let's get some pictures. Oh, there's the pictures behind us.
Ah,
Yeah, that's
consensus.
This is Twinkle Fingers. We love it. We like it.
On
We
their
accept
It
knees.
is good.
Well, I mean, I think that's an important place to start too. People need to understand first and foremost the hand signals, how to communicate. Because if you don't understand the hand signals and in and out, it's very easy to accidentally misuse them or to not use them enough or in the right places.
You know,
So I think
getting.
that's
Sorry.
facilitation basically of the group letting the new people know what the hand signals are and how to use them is extremely important part of reaching consensus.
Watching people twinkle finger what you're saying is so rewarding.
Yes, it is.
And you know,
And doesn't interrupt you at the same
Right,
time. Really
right.
nice. And that is really where it comes from. It's American Sign Language. It's the symbol for clapping.
True.
Okay, so consensus, we agree.
see, I thought I see in twinkle fingers meant like, yeah, what you're saying. I'm into that. You know, as opposed. But in voting at the end, or you know, consensusing at the end, it's
Yeah.
Sorry.
As opposed to yay or nay.
It has
a
Yay
double
or
meaning
nay,
there.
It's not.
Hands down, I disagree.
Which is sign
Or I
language
don't
for some-
consent.
Yes.
Very different meaning in sign language, actually.
Point of process means that
Stay
the
on track.
conversation is off track, or the facilitator has put their own opinion in, or someone has misused a signal, like someone has said, I have a point of information, which is another hand signal that says, I've got a piece of information to correct. You said the meeting's at 4. In fact, the meeting's at 5. I'm going to correct it. But sometimes you get that.
Back and forth, going direct response,
Or it's
something like
somebody's, somebody says, oh, I've got a point of information, when in fact they have an opinion. So if that happens, you throw up a point of
Right,
process.
right.
You're misusing the procedure.
that. Point of
It's a
process
very common one.
Yeah.
is signaling that we're witnessing a potential breakdown in process. We need to do something different now.
Yes.
You know, like when my computer stopped working for taking notes, I threw up a point of process like, look, if you guys want this on the record, we got to get me a computer right now. You know what I mean? Any breakdown in process, really. You know.
And the other hand signal for breaking into the process, for interrupting stack, which is the order in which people speak, is a C for clarification. I don't really understand what's going on in the conversation, so can you clarify?
And what people will do sometimes, a misuse of that would be somebody doing that and asking a rhetorical question, because that's blatantly an opinion,
Yes.
like not directly an opinion. So that's something I've seen before that was just like very frustrating to some people.
Yeah, it's easy
kind of
to
rude,
abuse
too.
the process.
What do you do when the meeting runs on forever and it dies out of exhaustion? There's no way to get, consensus, that's not consensus when the proposal fails out of exhaustion or...
No, it should be tabled. I mean, if it really isn't going anywhere and it's not building and people are not on board with it and they're just getting frustrated and bored with it, it seems like the best thing to do is probably table it or to use a different process. We had a really contentious issue one time when we were attempting to write a communication to the city, and there were a lot of different opinions, and we broke up into working groups of maybe 5 to 10 people apiece. It was a big GA, and it was really phenomenal. Each group worked on a different paragraph and brought it back together, and we put together a really nice letter from there. It wasn't successful, of course, because we were dealing with the city, but it was well written.
Wait, so you were able to get out a final document?
We did get out a final document. It wasn't successful. In other words, our approach to the city didn't work, but the letter itself was very nice.
It really is pretty phenomenal that you can break into these groups and bring it back together and get a final product, and it still keeps it's a voice not of these individuals in the mob, not discoherent and lacking a cohesive style or anything, but it's the final product still works out to a single voice. It still sounds like a single speaker in the writing itself.
Yes. Yeah. And the really nice thing about this particular instance was that everyone immediately agreed that this paragraph, that this group produced, that's the right paragraph to use. And then that group, the paragraph that they did over here, that was so there was no squabbling. Once the right paragraphs were reached, everybody knew it. And everyone consented to use the paragraphs from each group. It was really very nice.
Google Docs and other collaborative tools has really accelerated that process so nicely.
Okay, and then there is the block. The famous block, which has caused a lot of discussion in Occupy Tampa. Was probably one of the longest, most drawn out, weeks long, I think, days at least, to discover how we were going to do a block. And I actually have that here somewhere, what we finally came up with. And the reason it happened was because people were misusing the block, but we were not experienced enough facilitators to deal with it and to not allow the entire process to be derailed. And it was extremely frustrating for so many of us, and yet we really didn't know the proper procedure. So we had to come up with something. And this is what we came up with. We said the persons that are blocking are asked if they are sure they would like to block or if they would prefer to stand aside.
I think we should know what a block is first.
Yeah, because a block says, the community has reached consensus. The process has been undergone, and everyone has agreed to a product. You end up with a decision, and then someone goes, but I don't like that. What if I don't want to do that? I don't want to do that, and so I reject the community's work, and I block it. So we decided that a block has to be principled, which I think is true of anyone that's written about blocks. But in order to determine whether or not the block is principled, 90% of those attending have to say that it's a principled block. And then the real idea is that the person who's blocking has the option of leaving, because that's how powerful a block is. If you block, it says this goes against the ethics of this group as I see them. It goes against it's harmful to the movement, or it's in fact dangerous or damaging to the movement. So that would be a principled block if it meets one of those criteria.
I like the word veto better because I feel like it more
a personal veto.
I want to, at some point today, talk about vetoes, blocks that have led to something better, because there's stand-asides, there's friendly amendments, and then there's blocks. It's like the final, either you guys change your mind or I'm out of here, right? When was the last time there was a block?
Well, because we had such...
I mean, we haven't had a really contentious block in a pretty long time from what I can recall. The GAs I've been at, I don't know if Susie or Kristen, perhaps, those of any examples.
Some of our early blocks were so devastating to the entire group. I mean, they just paralyzed us for so long that people are much more cautious about using them now. They understand the severity of them. It really does mean that you're going to leave the movement if it goes through. And the idea is the community doesn't want anyone to leave. But if ultimately the community has consented to something and there's one or two people that refuse to consent, well, then you are rejecting the wisdom of the community. And therefore, perhaps this isn't the community for you?
I think an
Well, I
important.
mean, something I noticed with blocks and also stand-asides down twinkles would be, it pertains to both, would be the strength of each. Because what I would do if a block comes up, I would ask immediately what is the nature of that block or dissent, and then see how the group feels about how strong that dissent is. Because if somebody blocks
Yes.
and it isn't actually a block, then it shouldn't actually be treated as a block. And the group needs to be able to realize that. With dissent, that changes a little bit. And with dissent, if there's a down twinkle and what's the nature of your dissent. If the dissent is something that the group notices is total subversion, which has happened in other occupations that I've been in, where they've just been down twinkling just to mess with everybody, then the group should be able to make the decision to move forward regardless of that. Strength of dissent is very important.
My understanding
In my
is
opinion.
that just a dissent
Dissent
can
of
be
block.
recorded as a dissent, that it goes into the final decision and is recorded as part of the final decision, kind of like what happens in the Supreme Court. But a block is actually supposed to stop the decision. And the community gets to decide really whether it is going to stop the decision, whether it really is principled and they must back up and look at it, or if it's just selfish or unprincipled, in which case then that person has the option of leaving the community.
You know, you mentioned some people have been hesitant to block after it has derailed the process for so long. That's another concern, is you don't want to intimidate people away from block. You know what I mean? You want to encourage legitimate blocks, you know? And also I think the meta aspect of consensus is really important. You know, people have asked, is this consensus during the situation itself? You know what I mean? Like, in what ways does, you know, reviewing what you're doing while you're doing it, as opposed to resorting to a list of if-then rules, you know, I think is really helpful. And it brings back the sense of cooperative, well-meaning attitudes towards each other.
And that is, you know, I don't think people are afraid or intimidated to use a block. I think that what has happened is that people understand this, the importance of it, and are more reluctant to just trash the process and end the process where they want to continue the process. And because I think that certainly we do our best to address dissents and concerns, although sometimes they don't really.
I don't feel good. If I would feel terrible if an assembly ended and I knew that people were unsatisfied.
Yes.
Oh,
the
me
result.
too.
Yes.
That would bother me
Yes.
very, very much. Or something else that bothers me, which is very interesting, is I facilitated the GA once. It was a smaller GA. I think Susie was there. Susie was actually at this one. But where consensus was reached on a decision, what was the decision? It was that little one that we had in Kylie. Do you remember that?
A little decision in Kylie.
It was small in terms of the amount of people. James Cox was there.
It was in the amphitheater?
Yeah, it was in the amphitheater.
Well, I don't know. There were so many decisions made in the amphitheater.
It was really tiny, but in any event, what ended up happening was I saw a bunch of up twinkles, but based on the decision that was had, I was really distraught because it wasn't actually consensus. Because I saw people just kind of go, oh, fine, whatever, like not wanting to hold the group up and things like that, rather than actually working on getting a consented or truly consented decision made. And I was just really like bothered. So I was like, it looks like consensus, but this isn't consensus. And then what we did after that was start analyzing how that happened. I think Tristan might have been there too, as well. But,
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that was really interesting, and that's something to watch for. Is people just give not necessarily giving up, but not working as hard as they can to facilitate the process working as best as it can. It takes individual participation. And like some dissents weren't said and things like that. People held back some ideas, which is very detrimental to that sort of thing.
For the people involved in the process, I think it's important that every member balances between being submissive and being dominant in whatever rhetoric's going on the current issue that's being covered. I mean, if you're too submissive, you have what happened there, where the people involved just kind of okay, whatever, and don't really open up their minds and let the big brain grow, as I keep coming back to that metaphor. I really like that metaphor.
Yeah.
That's a good metaphor.
Yes.
And then the dominant personality that doesn't want to change their mind no matter what. They want to stick in this particular spot. Everybody else's opinions don't matter. And that's definitely not true, because then that's just your little mind against this big mind. It's not going to work.
The specific dominant personalities that came to mind when you said that, I'm thinking about them, and I'm thinking they feel threatened. They don't trust They don't trust us. That's really important, I think, is to trust the good intentions of everyone there and to
The group, yeah.
Yes, you have to trust the community, and you have to trust that if you're not there and you can't be there, that the community is going to make the best decision without you, though the ideal is to have as many people there as possible so that everyone owns the decision. But if you can't be there, it is still your community that's working on your behalf as well as everyone else's. And that
Mutual, I'm sorry, Susie.
No, you
I'm
go
cutting
ahead.
you off.
Mutual.
There's no intention of that.
Go ahead, Nate.
Oh, okay. I was just saying that trust is extremely important to developing consensus, because if you don't mutually trust the entire group, then you're not going to, consensus won't be reached, it just won't happen. Like, there's gonna be a lot of contention that doesn't need to be there. You're gonna get on, probably more likely to get obsessed with personalities rather than with the decision and what people are saying. So,
Or who's saying it. Yeah, if you're more involved with who's saying it than what they're saying, that's a real problem. And because the idea is to have dispute, the idea is to create as much, I did something, is to get as many different opinions as you can get. And so
Right.
that requires disagreement. So,
That's the philosophy.
there's a constructive and destructive conflict.
It's a very unconscious process,
The other.
paying attention to the person over the idea. I mean, just like
It's
interrupting and
a very, I guess, dialectic philosophy that thrives behind the idea of consensus, and that we thrive on these constructive conflicts within the
Constructive
the
conflicts.
process. Constructive
Right.
conflicts.
That was
Dialectic.
a big point Elizabeth brought up when we were in one of the meta-communication meetings was, how do we prevent groupthink, Because conflict, the whole point of consensus is just what you said, conflict being constructive. Let me know when we hit 10 minutes and 5 minutes, because there's a few responses to a question I want to read.
so.
Okay, so building consensus, I mean, I find it very important to ask the group as many things as possible when I'm facilitating. So, like, if I'm in question about what's going on in terms of my facilitation, in terms of, okay, do I give this person extra time or not? I'm going to ask the group, should we give this person extra time?
Temperature checks.
So,
Temperature checks.
basically, I just think it's very important to continuously get feedback from everybody who's present, and possibly people who aren't present if we have internet stack, which is a very useful thing that Mr. Tristan does.
Speaking of two things, one thing I just remember, Susie mentioned, a lot of times I found a good way to get to consensus when it's all kinds of little nitpicky things is to propose whatever you're proposing as an experiment, as something that lasts for a week or 2 weeks, and then to review it again later. And there's also, Jennifer, but when she was still here, brought up her concern about sneaky proposals, waiting till the General Assembly is only a few people and proposing something, getting consensus, quote unquote. But obviously that's not consensus. And the thing is, if someone who's in our community sends me a text message that says, I'm blocking this, I'll stop doing it, because consensus is, again, it's not just a bunch of rules, it's in your heart,
Yeah, the spirit of consensus is that you are working with your community, not that you are fighting to get your way. which is so often the case in voting. My way or the highway, sure.
People involved in the process trying to become politicians within the group, it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. No, and we have had those kind of people in the group, and they really don't last. They tend to go outside the group and continue trying to run the group from the outside without participating in it, and we're not very responsive to that, really. Okay.
Boosh. I mean, good for me. Anyway.
So we're going to take a short break and be back to talk about consensus some more. Aren't we?
Yeah.
G-morning, sunshine. Wakey, wakey. Text me back. Hey, did you tell your parents about us? Let's skip first period together. Did you get all my texts? Is practice over yet? Where are you at? Are you with your friends? That's L-A-A-A-A-M-M-E-E-E. Capital X, lowercase o, capital X, lowercase o.
I love you. JK. I hate you. JK. Are you ignoring me?
We're in a huge fight right now. Is this something I did?
I can see your lights on. I'm coming over.
What'd you dream about? Me? I'm lonely. Holla back.
Holla back.
Let's try something new. Nude pics. Send me some. Text me.
Okay, you have to get closer to the table because they're not showing on the camera. So there's only part of you showing.
I'll fall from your grace, but I'll never let go of your hand. I'll never let go.
1 in 8 Americans is struggling with hunger. Who's the 1 in 8 in your life? You can help today. Visit feedingamerica.org/1in8 to find your local food bank.
My joints ache so bad, I wake up in pain every day. I want to know why.
I want to know why my hair is falling out. How did this happen?
How did this happen? A little pain in my knee. That's how it started.
That's how
Hey,
it
let's
started.
talk about General
This rash on
Assembly.
my face, now it's like my body is attacking me. I want answers.
When you don't have the right answers, it may be time to ask your doctor the right question.
Could I have lupus?
He's going to do one more.
Hey.
Ready to go?
Yeah, but the fire's not out.
It's close enough.
Close enough? If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. I mean, the next thing you know, you've torched our whole neighborhood.
Which is why we're not going anywhere.
Exactly.
Kirk, I love you.
Be good.
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you
We're good.
can prevent wildfires.
Thanks, Smokey. No, I wasn't being sarcastic. I was
Things happen.
thanking Smokey. What was next?
You were going to read the.
So I've been doing surveys
Comments.
on what makes the General Assembly go well, and I just wanted to read a few responses here from the question. Oh, yeah, what makes the General Assembly go well? One person made a point that central, I think, is it's good, since good General Assemblies are basically functional, like a seasoned poker player. I don't know anything about that. It's easier to remember the bad beats. You remember the General Assemblies that went terribly. Well, yeah, a good General Assembly is functional. It doesn't stand out necessarily. So it's
Doesn't stand out because it happens more often.
people who bring their opinions and proposals with everyone, respecting each other, people who speak their minds. You need people to actually talk. Involvement which transcends self-righteousness, genuine interest in what the other person is saying, and non-judgmental understanding, or a wish to understand, or genuine wish to understand why they're saying it and how, and making it matter to you. Someone said a particular assembly that went well was the one where everyone agreed to bathe and wear clean clothes and shoes.
These are anonymous surveys. What do you
Yeah,
do?
so there's just a few things. I'll say some more if I notice some more good ones. There's a book here. I wish I would have read it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Well, So we had a Occupy the River. And as you can see, we had 5 kayaks with, I think, a total of 7 people. Is that correct? Somewhere around there. And in the background there, you can see we had actual 3 police boats visiting us.
Who was there for that?
We had 2 from TPD and 1 sheriff's boat, and they're all gathered up there going, oh no, what are we going to do with these few kayakers? That's pretty much it. It was a lovely day.
You know, my former teacher from Toledo, I posted a thing about the show today, and he posted some ideas about consensus. What is it? Actually, there's a few people here put on the outline. I'll read those too, so they at least get out there. What was it? 70. He says a standard rule for consensus is that everyone is 70% comfortable with the decision. I mean, you know, nitpicking forever has been a very annoying thing when it comes to getting something done too. Also, you know. And someone else commented on that, making sure people understand the difference between that and 70% agreement versus 70% comfortable. Consensus requires a maturity that allows one to say it's not exact. Oh, stop clicking, sorry. Consensus requires a maturity that allows one to say it's not exactly the way I would do it, but I can live with doing it this way. I call it the opposite of critical thinking. Generally, the biggest learning, this is you, Seth, isn't it?
It's one of those Tristanisms.
No, that wasn't his.
Actually, yeah, I took that from someone else.
Oh.
It's not voting for or against an idea, but rather giving passage to it or challenging some part of it that might need tweaking. Consensus is how people use their minds as one. All of us, we are dumb compared to the big mind we are creating together in the process of real grassroots democracy. Someone else thinks that. Generally, the biggest learning on this is that it is not voting in any way. Really grasping the concept of what consensus is, that's huge. We're still having to remind ourselves constantly.
That's the biggest problem that I see with people who don't understand it. That's the biggest roadblock, is thinking that still being tied into voting and binary.
Yeah.
And that's not at all what it is. And you can't do it that way.
Give many simple examples to explain the difference. Maybe act out the examples, i.e., like the choosing a movie example, voting in the use voting and consensus. Making sure to highlight how the different choices. Oh, you're talking about what to do for the show. Okay, I'm sorry. You know, that reminds me, though, this blog, Laird's Commentary on Consensus and Community, talks about different meeting formats, like getting people to draw pictures. Maybe if you're in an agonizing assembly where you can't come up with a mutually agreeable solution, you do something radical like get people to draw pictures of this solution, you know, and other.
And you can also stick different color stickers next to which solutions you think are best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then and then make work groups around the most popular ones and see which you can actually get people to work on and interested. And that's one thing about consensus also that we don't talk about a lot, is how to implement the ideas. Once you've got a decision or something that everyone can live with, and I've seen that language a lot, it's something that you can live with. It may not be, it's not the recipe I would have cooked because maybe I wouldn't have put eggs in it or something, but I can live with this. This works for me, and the community can move forward with this. Yeah. And then the next question is, how are we going to move forward with that?
That's one thing we're figuring
and
out.
who is going to be responsible for what, and how is it going to be implemented?
Ultimate
and we leave that undone a lot of times.
It's the resulting action. That's real. The consensus or whatever. What actually happens as a result of a proposal is really what I guess
is what matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can't just be purely intellectual. Oh, well, this should happen, but how is it done? And I mean, as well, with the 70%, I agree, a 70% agreement with 70% comfortable, right? Not agreement, but comfortability. What was I about to say?
About action.
Choked on my own brain.
It's there, I'm sure.
When there is consensus on a proposal that has when it comes into functioning, is the point is that you can come back to it later and tweak it however it needs to be done.
Yeah.
So it's not entirely important that it's perfect right now. Don't change it. It's done.
Right.
It's not like that. it's not set in stone. It's something that can be picked up again and tweaked when it needs to be. So, you know, if it's okay, go ahead.
Everything's
It's
in
okay.
motion, man.
Yeah.
Only constant is change.
We actually have a whiteboard, if I hope it's still in existence, that we put together at one of our last really big GAs with all the ideas of things that we wanted to do. And then we were going to come back the following Saturday night and do them. But another issue came up that had to be taken care of, if you recall. And then, so we have a giant whiteboard full of ideas that need to be worked on and implemented. So we have work to do. And it would be really nice to get a lot of people out to our GAs, which we hold at 7:30. It's at the Voice of Freedom Park in West Tampa, 2101 West Main Street, at the corner of Main and Albany in West Tampa, in Old West Tampa. And GAs are 7:30 every night.
7:30.
Although we're talking about revisiting how often we have them, what times we have them, and so if anyone wants to know when they are or wants input on when they are, they should consider participating in that process.
What days of the week do most people end up coming out usually to the GAs?
I find it's not consistent. It used to be weekends, but I don't think that's really true anymore. A lot of people come out on Thursday nights when we have our Thursday night throwdowns, our philosophical discussions. A lot of people come out on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays when we have direct action work groups.
When the website's back up, there's a calendar on there. Just the Tuesday chats on economics, the Sunday learning documentary time. There's my meta-communication meeting supposedly on Saturday, which is what this whole thing has really kind of been about. Another Occupy Tampa TV 2 weeks from tonight. What did you say, don't know the time? Not know the time yet?
I don't know the time yet, but there will be another.
2 minutes left.
There's more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Consensus right there.
What do we have to look forward to for the RNC? This is the old Tampa tank, correct? Is this the first tank? It's one of two. I know that they brought a tank down to show us down at Curtis Hickson one time.
Very threatening.
Very threatening.
I don't like that at all.
The helicopter they show us regularly. Very often during General Assemblies, we have helicopter visitors. We used to at Curtis Hickson, and now we find that they're at Voice of Freedom as well. They seem to know exactly when we're having our GAs, and they like to watch.
I like it. They're very boxy.
Yes.
It's very postmodern.
90 seconds. I'm really disappointed in our audience tonight for not calling. I wasn't really mean to be negative.
Well, it's because you love consensus, and consensus is based on having a lot of input.
From the bottom up, which is all you people on the other side of the TV, you're at the bottom.
Out in TV land.
Come join us. We don't.
Out in TV land, where Nate is
He doesn't
stranded without a car.
Yeah.
Let people
Stranded
send
in
instant messages to us too.
Babylon.
It's easier. It's less intimidating than a phone call.
Don't say that dirty
To
word.
send text messages or something, or instant messages.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out
That'd be
next
fun.
time.
There's really a lot about consensus we didn't even
So much more.
approach. So much more.
I really want to focus
But
maybe.
that we don't understand because it's constantly growing, developing, changing.
That's right.
You're
That's
constantly
right.
learning about it.
Organic.
Yes.
Consensus is an ever-evolving process.
It is an ever-evolving process.
And homework. We got homework. We got stuff we got to read. And
Yeah.
then once we read it, we got to learn how to bring that wisdom to the General Assembly and share it.
But we have the meta-communication group. We will be meeting Saturday night.
Yes, I am back on the planet.
I think I
Good.
want to come to that as well.
15
Back
seconds.
on the planet for
I like the
not
word
forever,
meta,
but
and
for a period.
communication's even better.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
meta-
Okay, let's take some
Nothing against outer space, people.
Yeah, we're not.
Nothing against outer
Oh,
space.
goodbye.
Bye. Bye.
Can I stop doing this? All right.